I'm Rachel, 33, the youngest daughter, the one they never quite included. This Christmas I hoped just maybe they'd save me a seat, but nothing changed. They still saw me as an afterthought. When I arrived, only one chair was left next to the coat rack by the door. I sat down quietly and waited for what none of them saw coming. They called me a +1 mistake. Not to my face, of course. That would have been too honest. Instead, it was the kind of thing whispered just loud enough past like an inside joke across the Christmas table, wrapped in polite smiles and second glances. I stood at the front door that evening, my gift balanced awkwardly in one hand, the cold wind biting at my ankles. Through the frosted windows, I could already hear laughter, loud, familiar, excluding. Anna's Christmas dinners were always meticulously arranged, name cards, color-coded seating, gold-trimmed napkins. Everyone had a place. Everyone except me. When I stepped inside, no one turned. No one paused. I wasn't late, just unannounced, or more accurately, uninvited. Anna greeted me like one might greet a neighbor dropping off misdelivered mail, polite, surprised, vaguely inconvenienced. "Oh, Rachel, you came." Her voice stretched a little too long on my name, like she needed a moment to recall it. Claire stood behind her, wearing a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She smiled with her lips, not her eyes. "We didn't think you were coming this year," Claire said sweetly. "We assumed you'd be with someone else, or somewhere else." There was no seat for me at the table, not at first. When I asked, Anna blinked, then turned to the sideboard. "Well, we can bring the folding chair," she said to no one in particular. "I think it's still in the garage." The folding chair. Every year that damned chair. A metal thing with one uneven leg and a faded blue cushion. It never matched. It never belonged. Someone placed it by the door. Not at the table. Not even at the corner. Just adjacent. Like an afterthought. Like me. I sat without a word, my gift still on my lap. I didn't unwrap my coat. I didn't need to. The conversations resumed without me, discussions of vacations, house renovations, and someone's promotion, Claire's, I think. She made sure to mention the title twice. I watched the candles flicker on the table, their light reflecting off the silverware. The scent of rosemary ham hung in the air. Anna had prepared everything perfectly as always. She liked things orderly, predictable, controlled, and I was none of those things. When Mom finally acknowledged me, it was to ask if I could take a group photo. "You have long arms," she said, handing me the phone. "And you're not in the way." I took the photo, stepped back, framed them in the glow of the chandelier, and I didn't say a word. That was my role after all. The mistake that showed up late, the seat by the door, the hand behind the camera. They smiled not for me, but for the image they wanted to preserve. As I handed the phone back, I caught a glance from Mr. Grayson. He was seated at the far end beside Mom. Unusual. He was the family's lawyer, but never a guest. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and then returned to his wine. I folded my hands and looked down at the worn cushion beneath me. My coat whispered against the chair as I shifted slightly. The cold hadn't left my skin. Behind me, someone laughed at a joke I hadn't heard. In front of me, they passed plates over my head. I stayed quiet, but I saw everything. Anna's voice carried over the table like a soft command. Every sentence sounded like a subtle reminder of who she was and who she wasn't. She spoke of her new investment property, how the holiday market had been kind to her. Claire chimed in with praise, their laughter synced, polished like a script rehearsed too many times. It all felt intentional. Not one question was directed my way. The gift I brought, a hand-knit scarf for Mom, sat unopened beside the dessert tray. I watched as she placed Anna's imported candle set at the center of the table, admiring it as though it were sacred. "Anna always knows what I like," Mom said loud enough for everyone. Such thoughtfulness. The scarf stayed untouched. It was green, Mom's favorite color. I had stitched it over 2 weeks after work every night. But I didn't say that. No one asked. Mr. Grayson spoke briefly, something about the weather, a ski trip delayed. I noticed how no one questioned why he was here. No one ever did. In this family, some presences were expected, others tolerated. Mine apparently fell into the latter. During dessert, Claire passed me a small plate with the tiniest sliver of pie. "Didn't think you'd want much," she smiled. "You always watched your figure right." I nodded. She didn't wait for a response. When the carols played from Anna's Bluetooth speaker, everyone joined in except me. My chair still by the door made it easy to disappear. At one point, a gust of wind slipped through the crack, brushing cold air across my feet. No one noticed. Or more likely they did and chose not to. Anna passed around her holiday newsletter, a glossy printout with pictures of her kids, her house, her dog, and a Santa hat. I took a copy, flipped through the pages without reading. On the last page, she had printed a family photo from last year. I wasn't in it. That wasn't surprising. I hadn't been invited last year. There had been no folding chair then, no seat by the door, just absence. Still seeing the frame, everyone gathered around the fireplace, even Claire's brother, who barely showed up, made something settle uncomfortably in my chest. A slow, quiet ache, like being forgotten while still in the room. Mom's voice interrupted my thoughts. "You know?" she said, looking toward Anna. "It's so nice when we're all together." Then an awkward pause. Someone coughed. Anna glanced at me, then quickly away. "I mean, Mom corrected most of us." I didn't flinch. Not this time. Claire whispered something to Anna, and they both giggled. The kind of laughter that didn't rise, just lingered like perfume in stale air. I shifted in the chair, its metal frame creaking just slightly. "I'm getting some air," I said quietly and stood. No one stopped me. I walked out to the porch, letting the door shut gently behind me. The air was sharp, the kind that woke you up, even if you didn't want to be awake. I stood there a moment, watching the snow collect along the railing. Inside, I could still hear the music, the clatter of forks, another round of toasts. I could picture it clearly, how Anna would tilt her glass and make a joke that made everyone laugh, how Claire would rest her head on her husband's shoulder and sigh as if she were the star of a quiet holiday film. And I was the editor's cut, the version left on the floor. Then the door opened behind me. Mr. Grayson stepped out, coat in hand. His breath formed a pale cloud in the air. "They're good at pretending," he said gently. I said nothing, but pretending doesn't make it real. He looked at me long enough that I had to glance away. "They think I'm here to celebrate," he continued. "But I brought papers." He tapped the folder in his hand. "For your father." I blinked. He smiled, but it wasn't a joyful smile. It was knowing. A pause, heavy and deliberate. "I think he said things will look different next year." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He returned inside. I stayed a moment longer. The snow was beginning to fall harder now, quiet and unrelenting. Inside, my scarf was still untouched, but I wasn't cold anymore. I walked slowly along the edge of the porch, dragging my finger across the icy wood railing. Inside, their laughter rose again. Someone had told a joke. Claire, probably. Her humor had always been edged in vinegar. From this distance, the windows framed the family like a snow globe. Perfect, curated, sealed. My phone buzzed, a message from Lila, my friend from work. "You good, still surviving Christmas?" I typed back one word, "Yep." Then paused, deleted it, and just sent a thumbs-up emoji instead. Even that felt like too much. The porch light flickered as I sat on the wooden step. My shoes left faint imprints in the fresh snow. I traced the toe of one boot over the other, letting the rhythm slow my breath. The last time I'd had a Christmas with my dad was 5 years ago. He had this quiet way of including me, not loudly, not with speeches, just with presence. A squeeze on the shoulder, making sure I had a chair, a real one, not something metal and foldable. He hadn't been perfect, but he'd seen me. His absence this year felt sharper than ever. The door creaked open again. For a moment I thought maybe, but it was just Claire stepping out to take a call. She barely glanced at me. I listened as her voice dropped into performance mode. "Yes, it's just us," she said. "Well, and Rachel, but she's, a beat. She's not really part of things." I didn't move, just pulled my coat tighter. Claire turned her back to me, finishing her call in hushed tones. When she slipped back inside, she didn't say goodbye. The porch creaked behind me once more, this time softer. I didn't turn around. I already knew who it was. Anna sat beside me without a word. We watched the snow together for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice low. "You always make it awkward." I blinked, not in surprise, but in recognition. Of course it was my fault. "You sit there like a ghost," she continued. "It throws everything off." Still I didn't respond. She stood up. "Next time, maybe just skip it." I looked at her, then really looked. Her coat was perfect, her makeup untouched, her presence curated like everything else in that room. I nodded once slowly. Anna hesitated, maybe expecting a reaction. When she didn't get one, she exhaled sharply and went back inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stayed. The wind picked up, scattering powdery flakes across the porch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver pin, Dad's old cufflink. I'd brought it to give to Mom, but now I just held it, the metal warm from my hand. Inside, someone had started passing out gifts. Through the frosted glass, I could see names written in gold script, all of them matching, all of them not mine. But that was okay. The snow kept falling, and for once I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged there. Some silences weren't empty. Some silences said, "I see it all. I just won't say it out loud." I stood and brushed the snow from my coat. As I reached for the doorknob, I paused. Then I turned and walked the other way. The next morning, the house was quieter, but not in a peaceful way, more like the calm after a storm no one talked about. Footsteps padded over carpet drawers, opened and shut. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air, too sweet, too forced. I stayed in the guest room a little longer than usual, brushing my hair in silence, letting the sounds of the house pass me by. There was a family breakfast in the dining room, of course, the annual holiday morning spread. I hadn't been invited directly, but I knew better than to wait for an invitation. By the time I walked in, most of the seats were taken. Anna and her husband, Mark, sat at the center of the table talking with Mom about real estate and something Claire had seen on a cooking show. Aunts and uncles I barely recognized chimed in, occasionally adding polite laughter. No one looked up when I entered. I took the spot at the end, the farthest chair next to the kitchen doorway. It wobbled slightly when I sat one leg shorter than the others. Still, it was a chair. That was more than yesterday. Claire passed around her homemade scones. As she reached me, she pulled the basket back a bit as if remembering something. "Oh," she said with a mock apologetic smile. "You don't eat gluten, right?" "I do," I replied gently. "Oh, I thought..." She blinked, then laughed. "Well, never mind." She handed me a napkin, but not a scone. Mom's voice picked up then. "So we'll be doing the family gift exchange tonight. Let's aim for 6 p.m. Everyone in the living room." Claire clapped her hands lightly. "And matching sweaters this year, like always. Matching sweaters." Another tradition I hadn't been told about. "Did someone bring one for Rachel?" Anna asked flatly, not looking in my direction. Silence. Then Mom said, "She wasn't on the group thread. It was just the core family." I folded my napkin slowly. Claire leaned in toward Anna. "Maybe we can lend her one of the old ones." "From 2019, maybe." They both laughed. "I'm good," I said softly. "Really?" No one responded. The conversation picked back up effortlessly, skipping past me. I looked at my plate, a few strawberries, a bit of scrambled egg. The edge of the fork reflected the chandelier above, distorted and dim. Anna's daughter Lacey came down the stairs a few minutes later, rubbing her eyes and dragging a stuffed fox. She wandered over to Claire, who picked her up and cooed. "Want some cocoa, sweetie? I want to sit next to Mommy," Lacey mumbled. Claire pulled out a chair from the middle and sat her down. As she did, she glanced toward me and whispered, not quietly enough, "That one's taken, Rachel." The fork made a small clink as I set it down. I stayed for another 10 minutes, maybe 15, smiled when someone cracked a joke, nodded when an aunt complimented the new backsplash in the kitchen, but I didn't speak again. When I stood to leave, my chair scraped sharply against the floor. That was the only sound that marked my exit. Back in the guest room, I closed the door and sat on the bed, palms resting on my knees. The old family photo still hung above the dresser, the one from a ski trip I hadn't been invited to. In the picture, everyone was in matching blue coats. Anna was in the center holding Lacey. Claire stood beside her looking polished. Even Mom had a soft smile. There had never been a version of that photo with me in it. I took a deep breath and stood. There was no anger in me. Not really. Just a dull ache, the kind you stop noticing because it never fully leaves. From the hallway, I heard Claire's voice rise again. Honestly, she's always made things complicated. Then, Anna Mom only ever invited her out of guilt. And finally, Mom? She was an accident. A +1 mistake. The words landed softly, almost too softly, like a snowfall that looked beautiful until it buried everything. I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled to a folder of messages Dad had sent me years ago. His words weren't long, just check-ins, a photo of a book he thought I'd like, a recipe he wanted to try someday. We'll cook it together, just us two. I read through them slowly, each one anchoring me back into something real, something that wasn't made of silence and sugar-coated cruelty. Then I heard my name. Rachel. The voice was outside my door. It was Anna. Anna stood there holding a folded red sweater, her eyes flicking over me like she was assessing damage, not checking in. "Hey," she said, not stepping into the room. "Do you want to join the family photo later?" I blinked. "There's a photo." She nodded. "Yeah." Fireplace, 5 p.m., matching sweaters. "I don't have one." A pause. She held the red sweater a little higher. This one was extra. It looked smaller than the others, or maybe it was just the lighting. Either way, it didn't matter. "Thanks," I said, accepting it gently. "I'll see how it fits." Anna stood there a second longer, like she expected more from me, maybe a story, maybe an apology. Then she gave a tight smile and left. I laid the sweater on the bed. It smelled faintly of lavender and someone else's perfume. Later that afternoon, I sat outside on the porch, swinging the cold metal armrest biting through my sleeve. The yard was quiet, save for the faint jingle of Christmas lights swaying in the breeze. Claire stepped out with a mug of cider, her boots clicking against the wooden floorboards. "You're always out here," she said. I smiled. Fresh air helps. She sat beside me without asking, her mug cradled in both hands like a prop. "You know, she began when I first joined this family. I felt out of place too." I looked at her. "But I adapted," she continued, sipping. "It's about knowing where you fit, not pushing." I didn't reply. "I mean," she went on, "you've always been a little removed, haven't you?" The swing creaked as she shifted her weight. "Claire," I said softly, "is there a point to this?" She blinked. "I'm just saying, maybe if you tried more, showed up earlier, helped out, brought something, people wouldn't see you as distant." I looked at the yard again. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the dry leaves along the walkway. "I did bring something," I said. She paused. "Oh," I nodded. "Dad's letters." That silenced her. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I stood. "I think I'll go help set the table." Inside, the house buzzed with energy. Dishes clattered. Someone shouted about the gravy. Anna directed everything like a general in a Holiday War Centerpiece's napkin folds seating chart. When I entered, she looked surprised. "Hey, can you light the candles?" "Of course." I moved through the space like a guest, not quite part of the machinery, but not entirely invisible. Each candle I lit flickered against the polished silverware and crystal glasses. The table looked perfect, untouched. The place cards were already set. I glanced at mine. It was the same as last year, far end next to the pantry door. I didn't mind. I'd learned to make space where I was given none. Dinner started with a toast. Mom stood, her glass raised, and said how grateful she was for the children, the new in-laws, and the future of this family. Her eyes passed over me once quickly. We all sipped the champagne bubbles like quiet laughter. Courses arrived, soup then roast, then sides passed down the table like a rhythm rehearsed. No one looked directly at me, but Claire's commentary filled the gaps. "Mark's firm got that big account. Tell them honey Anna's thinking of launching her own brand, Lacey's reading at a second-grade level." I smiled at each one politely, nodded, chewed, swallowed. Then, as dessert was being cleared, Uncle Nate turned to me. "So, Rachel," he said loud enough for others to hush, "what are you up to these days?" The table went still. It was the first time anyone had asked me anything all night. I looked up. "I work in behavioral design," I said calmly. "Consulting for nonprofit systems." A few blinks. A pause. Then Aunt Linda spoke up. "Oh, that's good." Mark cleared his throat. So like psychology, human-centered systems, I clarified. Mostly healthcare access for underserved communities. Mom dabbed her mouth with a napkin, eyes fixed on her plate. That's niche, Claire said, tilting her head. It's meaningful, I replied. Silence again. Then Anna said, You've always liked those quirky paths. Remember the pottery phase? Laughter broke out, too loud, too eager. Even Lacey giggled, not understanding the joke. I picked up my water glass. It was cool, beaded with condensation. I let it rest against my palm for a moment before placing it down. Not a phase, I said. But no one was listening anymore. Anna turned to Claire to discuss Lacey's piano lessons. Mom was already reaching for the tea set. I excused myself. Upstairs, I stood in front of the mirror. The red sweater fit, but just barely. The sleeves clung too tightly. The neckline itched. I peeled it off and folded it carefully. Outside, the family gathered around the tree, music playing, low lights blinking in rhythm. Through the window, I watched Anna adjusting the camera. Claire posed beside Mom, all smiles. Mark held Lacey on his shoulders. The sweater lay in my hands like something borrowed and never quite mine. Then I heard a voice from the doorway. Rachel. It was Mr. Grayson. I turned toward Mr. Grayson, surprised to see him at the house so early. He looked slightly winded, as if he had rushed from somewhere, his long coat still dusted with snow. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow, I said. I know, he replied, stepping in and closing the door gently behind him. But there's something we need to discuss. Tonight. Downstairs, laughter spilled from the living room, the unmistakable clink of glasses, the crinkle of wrapping paper, the rituals of a family bound tightly in their version of joy. But I followed Mr. Grayson quietly into the small study at the end of the hall. It smelled faintly of old books and cinnamon candles someone had forgotten to blow out. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin envelope. Your father left instructions, he said, voice low. Specific ones. And they pertain to you. My hands didn't move right away. The envelope sat between us like something fragile, too delicate to tear open. He asked that I give this to you first, Mr. Grayson continued, before the formal reading tomorrow. He wanted you to have time to process it privately. I nodded and took it. The flap was already unsealed. Inside, a short letter. Neatly written, familiar slant. My father's. Rachel. I'm sorry I let silence become a habit. You were never a mistake. I was the mistake, too weak to challenge what was easier to ignore. You were always watching, always steady, always more than they knew. This is yours now, and you owe no one an explanation. Dad. It wasn't long, but I had to read it twice before my eyes stopped burning. When I looked up, Mr. Grayson had stepped away, giving me space. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. Thank you, I said quietly. He nodded. They don't know I've given it to you. I figured. He hesitated. You'll come tomorrow, I will. As he left, I stood in the dim room, the letter pressed to my chest, the firelight from the hallway flickering across the wall like quiet echoes. Later that evening, when Anna passed me in the hall, she didn't mention the photo I'd missed. Claire was upstairs putting Lacey to bed. Mom had retired early, a migraine, she said, after too much wine. I sat in the corner of the living room with a cup of tea gone cold, listening to the low hum of carols on the stereo and the faint laughter from Mark and Uncle Nate in the den. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to speak. The words I needed had already been written. The sweater was still folded on the bed upstairs. The chair by the door, my chair sat empty now. The plate and napkin cleared as if I had never been there at all. But tomorrow they would see. Not because I would tell them, but because they would be made to listen. Christmas morning came with a strange hush, as if the snowfall from the night before had muffled not just the streets, but the tension in our house. The usual clamor, Claire barking orders about the brunch setup, Anna reminding everyone of the schedule, Mom adjusting centerpieces, all happened in fragments like scenes from a play, whose script everyone was suddenly unsure of. I sat on the low bench by the window, sipping coffee from a chipped mug Dad used to favor. My letter was folded in the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't plan to bring it out, not unless I had to. The living room was slowly filling. Cousins arrived with their kids, loud and laughing. Aunt Valerie had her tray of cinnamon buns, and Mark fiddled with the speaker system trying to sync Christmas playlists. No one asked me to help. I didn't offer. At 10:00 sharp, just as the gift exchange was starting, Mr. Grayson stepped in. The room stilled not immediately, but like a wave folding back after hitting a stone. "Apologies for the early intrusion," he said gently, his leather briefcase still in hand. "But your father wished for the formal reading to be done while the family was together. And, well," he gestured to the gathered bodies, "this seems about right." Anna blinked first. "The will? Now yes," he said, "if that's all right with you all." There was a moment's confusion, heads turning, eyes glancing sideways, but no one said no, not aloud. Chairs were pulled in, some sat on the floor. The fireplace crackled as the only background noise. Mr. Grayson opened the folder and began reading the formalities, full name, date, legal statements. No one truly listened until the first name appeared. "To my eldest daughter Anna." I didn't look at her, but I heard the subtle inhale. Assets, property, jewelry, the kind of things she'd expect, the kind of things she'd already half claimed in her mind. "To Claire." She looked up from her phone, surprised to be mentioned second. Then came the list again, smaller items, shared assets, vacation shares. "To my son-in-law Mark." He tried not to grin, but couldn't quite help himself. Then the room shifted. "And to my youngest daughter Rachel." There it was. All eyes turned, not subtly, not kindly. I kept mine fixed on Mr. Grayson, who paused for only half a beat before continuing. "I leave the family cabin at Silver Lake, along with the full ownership rights and deed per our conversation in October. It is hers alone. No contest? Silence. The kind that has a pulse. Someone's spoon clinked against a saucer. Mom spoke first. That must be a mistake." Mr. Grayson cleared his throat. "It's not. There's an addendum handwritten confirming the intent. Your husband was very clear." Claire's voice cut in sharp and mocking. "Why would she get the cabin? She doesn't even go up there. That place it's part of this family. She is part of this family," Mr. Grayson said, his voice even, "regardless of how you've chosen to treat her." A beat passed. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I simply met Anna's eyes. She looked back at me, unsure for the first time in years. Not angry, not smug, just off balance. No one spoke for a while. The fireplace popped wood, shifting under the heat. Claire let out a short laugh, dry, more shocked than amused. "Is this some kind of charity gesture?" Guilt, maybe. Mr. Grayson didn't answer her. He carefully folded the will and slid it back into the envelope. Anna cleared her throat. "Dad never said anything about this to us." "He would have told me." "He didn't need to," Mr. Grayson replied calmly. "He discussed it directly with Rachel. He said she was the only one who listened when he wasn't being Father of the Year." I heard a sharp inhale from Mom's side. But still no one said my name. Not in apology, not in defense. It was Mark who tried to redirect. "It's Christmas. Maybe this isn't the time your father chose today on purpose," Mr. Grayson cut in. "He wanted it known, not whispered later, known while you all were gathered." I finally stood, not quickly, not to draw attention, just slowly, naturally. Claire's eyes narrowed as I adjusted the hem of my coat. "So that's why you showed up this year," she said under her breath. "You knew." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I didn't." I paused, but I hoped he'd left something that proved I mattered. The room held its breath again. Anna opened her mouth, then closed it. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her chair knuckles, pale. Mom looked down at her lap. She hadn't said a word to me all morning, not even hello. I turned to Mr. Grayson. "Thank you for reading it. I won't stay long." He nodded. "It's yours, Rachel. You can visit the cabin any time now. It's fully yours." I looked around the room, the family that had always been a step removed, where I'd been present but not invited. Claire's kids were on the carpet unwrapping boxes. The sound of tearing paper seemed louder than usual. Anna sat upright, composed but shaking. She wouldn't break, not in front of everyone, but her grip on her image had slipped. I took a step toward the hallway. "Rachel," Mom said suddenly. I stopped. "You know that place needs a lot of work. It's not just some prize." I turned slowly to face her. I know, but I don't mind work. Then I walked past her, past the tree, past the table where I wasn't offered a seat. Every footstep was quiet, but every one of them landed. Behind me, no one moved, not a single weight, not a single. I'm sorry, just the weight of what had changed settling over them like snow that finally starts to stick. I reached for the doorknob. The brass felt cold even with the fire roaring behind me. I paused not for drama but to breathe. Through the narrow window on the front door I could see the snow still falling. Thick, soft flakes tumbling quietly to the ground. The kind of snow that made you forget the noise of the world. Then I heard the sound of a chair leg scraping slowly against the hardwood floor. I turned my head just enough to see. Mr. Grayson had stood. His hands were calmly folded in front of him like a man finishing something important. Your father always said he spoke to the room that Rachel was the only one who ever saw him for more than what he failed to be. No one responded. Not even Mark. Anna sat still, her jaw clenched tight, blinking faster now. Claire had retreated behind her wine glass, though it was empty. Mom remained unmoving. Her hands in her lap, her mouth a firm line, but her eyes glistened with something she wasn't ready to name. I looked at them one last time. Not with anger, not even with sadness. Just clarity. It was also quiet. That kind of quiet that only happens when people don't know what to say, not because they have nothing, but because they've lost the right to speak first. I opened the door. The wind met me softly. No dramatic gust, just the natural cold of a December afternoon. I stepped outside. Behind me, the muffled sounds of the house lingered, the fire, the wrapping paper, the silence of people who finally saw what they missed. As I walked down the front path, my boots crunched over snow that no one had bothered to shovel. I passed the familiar front gate untouched since I was a teenager, and then a faint buzz in my coat pocket. I paused at the mailbox, pulled out my phone. A new message. From Mr. Grayson. Your father also left a note. For you only. I'll deliver it personally after the holidays. I stared at it for a moment, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. The cabin. I hadn't been there in years. The roof would need repair. The wood stove probably rusted through, but it was his favorite place, the only place where he ever laughed without the weight of everyone's expectations. I crossed the street, slowly turned the corner, and disappeared from view. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Sometimes you don't need them to say your name out loud. Sometimes the silence is finally yours. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a door closing softly and the sound of your own steps finally echoing where no one dared walk with you, not louder, just steadier. And this time they all listened.